friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams. Today I'm going to talk about the rest of the books that I read in the month of September. I did do a mid-month wrap-up a couple weeks ago where I talked about 8 books. I will show you those real quickly, but I did already talk about them, so I'm not going to talk about them here. I will talk about the 8 books that I read at the end of the month. When I look at these piles and see that I have 16 books, I'm kind of blown away because also in September I watched 3 seasons of Outlander on Netflix. I finished up a couple seasons of Schitt's Creek at the beginning of the month, and I just recently watched the whole new episode of The Good Place that's on Netflix. So I did a ton of TV watching this month. I have no idea how I have 16 books here. It is what it is. And I'm sporting my new t-shirt. Long sleeve tee. I can finally wear it. I splurged earlier this summer, bought this on Amazon, and I love it. And it's finally cool enough outside to wear it. Yay. So first off, here are the 8 books I've already talked about. I'm just gonna go over them real quickly in case any of them pique your interest. Then you can go back and watch that video from a couple weeks ago. I read Lovely War by Julie Berry. Absolutely loved this historical fiction mixed with Greek gods. Interesting mix. YA, love, love, love. The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory, a romance, so much fun. I think I gave it 4 stars. Emily of New Moon by my dear friend, Ella Montgomery. This was the first book I read for Kindred Spirit September, and I absolutely loved it. Another book that was a 5-star read for me was Susan Meisner's The Last Year of the War. This was for our Goodreads Readalong group. At 4 stars, another historical fiction that was so good, The Invention of Wings by Sue Monk Kidd. A book that I read in one day, middle grade Foxheart. You guys picked this for me for Booklist Thursday. This is by Claire Legrand. Middle grade fantasy, tons of fun, quirky, cute, lovely adventure story. And The Landscapes of Anne of Green Gables, which is kind of a coffee table book, which I did read cover to cover. It's stunning and gorgeous. I think I ended up giving that 5 stars as well. And the 8th book that I read at the beginning of the month was Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I listened to that on audiobook. It was cute, ultimately forgettable, but fun. Now, I have 8 more to talk about. I did mention that in that mid-month wrap-up that I was reading The Switch by Beth O'Leary. I really enjoyed this. Her first book, The Flat Share, was kind of more of a rom-com. This one was not so much a rom-com. This was really about this family of women, the grandmother mostly and the granddaughter, who end up switching places because they're feeling a little bit stuck. This deals with grief. They both have experienced some pretty severe loss, and their lives just need kind of a jump start, and so they switch places. The granddaughter lives in London and the grandmother lives in a small town, and they kind of re-find themselves and discover new things about themselves as well as they trade places. And the mother in between the two is also part of the story, and the mother and the daughter have a pretty tense relationship because of the loss that they experienced. So it's just a family story about these women finding themselves, and I really loved this one. I think I gave it 4 stars. Delightful. I know that it hasn't received high praise from everybody, but I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it a lot. So thanks, Beth O'Leary. Then I decided halfway through the month that I was going to participate in the Fall Into Reading reading challenge that lasts for 3 months. It's hosted by 4 BookTube ladies: Rainey from Rainy Day Reads, Tia from Tia and All the Books, Angie from Literary Labors, and Kelly from Cozy Reader Kelly. And so halfway through the month, I plugged in all of my books just to see. They have 2 different charts on Instagram. One of them has 15 squares and one of them has 25 squares, I believe. And all of my books so far fit into the 15 square grid, so I switched over to the 24 grid. And so because of that, I picked up a graphic novel that wasn't on my radar at all, but I was at the library with the kids that I nanny and just saw this on the shelves and grabbed it. And this is White Bird by R.J. Palacio, who wrote Wonder. And this story is totally fictional, but it's Julian, who's one of the bullies in Wonder. I think in one of the accompanying books to Wonder, Julian gets a chapter and we learn a little bit about his grandmother. And this is Julian's grandmother's story. So it's a little bit roundabout way, but this is a graphic novel. Julian's grandmother lived during World War II and actually had to go into hiding for a number of months. She's Jewish. And this is about Julian's namesake, like why he's named Julian. And it just was lovely, absolutely lovely, heartbreaking. I teared up a couple times, but also just really enjoyed this. I don't always get along well with graphic novels, but I really liked this one. I was kind of sad that it was totally fictionalized. I mean, I wanted parts of it to be true, but I also was glad that it was fictionalized because of some of the things that happened toward the end that I wanted to be different, because I kind of fell in love with these characters. So yeah, this was fantastic. Absolutely loved this. I feel like I need to read everything R.J. Palacio ever writes because it's so tender and beautiful. Then I picked up a very current read, Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. I was surprised my library hold came in so quickly. Well, I had put it on hold as soon as I knew it was coming out and as soon as I could. So I was a little bit early in the holds list. So that's why I want to try to get it back to the library for the next person. I, as you know, or if you don't know, I do love Frederick Bachman. I have loved so many of his books. This one, I think I went in with too high of expectations and it didn't meet all of those expectations. I did end up giving it 4 stars because by the end, I just thought it was brilliant. But it took me a long time to really get into it. I wish I was buddy reading this with somebody and could have talked along the way about things. And I have buddy read a couple of his other books. And so I wish that I'd buddy read this one as well. And that might have helped it to be 5 stars. But in this one, we follow this father and son who are cops. And also there's a bank robber who ends up running across the street and holding hostage this group of people who are at an open house at an apartment. So the bank robber is holding them hostage. The father and son cop team are dealing with this situation, and so we get interviews of them. Once the hostages are released, we get interviews, and there's just something amiss about this whole situation. And we kind of learn about each of the different characters in the apartment that are being held hostage, each of the hostages, and we learn about their lives and their messed up stories, and we learn about the bank robber and their messed up story and why they chose to rob a bank, and we learn about the father and son and their situation. It's very character driven, which is typical for Bachman. He's so good at writing characters who are so nuanced. There's not really like a good and a bad guy. And that is very prevalent in this book as well. That's kind of across the board with his books. I find that I love the characters that he wrote, and I do like the characters in this one as well. It's funny in parts. I laughed out loud. I even teared up a little bit by the end, which was surprising to me because it did take me quite a while to get into it. But I definitely recommend it, but maybe read it with someone else so that you can kind of talk through things as you go. That might add to the enjoyment. I don't know, 4 stars. But I'm glad I read it, and I will own it someday because I currently own almost all of Bachman's books. Then moving on to another Kindred Spirit September book, I read Before Green Gables by Budge Wilson. This was on my 2020 TBR cart, and so someone had recommended this to me to read at the beginning of the year, and I'm so glad that I read it. This is kind of a prequel, Before Green Gables, obviously, of Anne of Green Gables' life before she arrives in Prince Edward Island and lives with Matthew and Marilla. So we learn about the different homes that she was in where she had to do so much work, basically an indentured servant, foster child since quite a young age. We meet her parents, Walter and Bertha. We learn about them and what happened to them. And we see how Anne kind of develops into this quirky, lovable, passionate, imaginative character that we know and love from Anne of Green Gables. We see a kind neighbor who teaches her big vocabulary words. We see her growing her love for education and reading, and we see her work ethic and how she tries to see the best in other people. Oh, it's just so lovely. I really enjoyed reading this book. I was captivated from the beginning, and I like that I could see, like, in Anne of Green Gables, we only get little glimpses of her life before Green Gables, and this really took that and branched it out without changing Anne's character, without changing the story that we know and love from Anne of Green Gables. So I thought that this was wonderful. So good. 4 stars. Yay. Then that same weekend, some of these you may have heard about a little bit from a weekend reading blog that I posted last week, but I also finished The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. I did give this 4 stars. I did not love this as much as many others that I've heard of. We follow this young boy named Elwood who is a young black boy sent to the Nickel Academy, which is kind of a reform school, detention center, horrible place, turns out, where young men, boys, even as young as 5 or 6 years old, up through 18, are conscripted to do work projects and are abused greatly, and it's just awful. And some of them are sent there because they really did something wrong, and some of them, like Elwood, were sent there because they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it's horrifying. It is based on a real place in Florida, not called the Nickel Academy. I forget the name of the real place, but yeah, this was a horrifying. It's a tiny little book, just over 200 pages, and it was pretty compelling, especially at the beginning. But there were definitely parts where either it got too literary for me, and I kind of got a little lost in the story and the structure of it, but also parts that were a little bit slower paced, and I kind of lost interest and was dozing off. So I didn't love it as much as everyone else, but I also think that it's a really important read, and is really well done, and I am interested in reading more from Colson Whitehead. I'm counting this as a book read because I did read this cover to cover, and that's the Anne of Green Gables cookbook. This was gifted to me by Judy. Thank you so much, Judy, for sending this to me. I had so much fun one day reading through this, reading all the quotes from the different books, and choosing some recipes to cook. I'll show you. I did make these chocolate caramels, which turned out delicious. So good. I made raspberry cordial, which was also delicious, but I need to dilute it in order to drink it because it's pretty strong. I made this baked macaroni, only I used cauliflower, and it was delicious. And lastly, I made this pound cake, which I think I overbaked because it turned out really dry, but I brought it to the kids that I nanny and they really enjoyed eating it. So that is that. I ended up putting most of the caramels in the freezer. I still have quite a few because it made a big batch, and I did share those with the kids I nanny as well. But yeah, this is just a beautiful cookbook. There are quotes all the way through it in the midst, and photographs. It's stunning, and I'm so thankful for Judy for sending this to me for my birthday this year. Yay. I think that was, oh no, that's not the last Kindred Spirit September book. This is the last Kindred Spirit September book. These last two I technically finished on October 1st, but I was most of the way done. I had less than 100 pages of both of them, so I'm counting them for September. It's my channel. I can do what I want. So I did read House of Dreams, The Life of Ella Montgomery by Liz Rosenberg. And this is a middle grade level biography of the life of Ella Montgomery. I have never, I don't think, read a biography for middle grade except when I was in middle grade. I had a hard time imagining a middle grade reader reading this book at all. Even if they had to for a project, it's just a little on the long side, and some of the aspects of Ella Montgomery's life are really sad and hard. And not that middle grade readers shouldn't read that, they should. But just the way that it was written felt a little choppy at times, very simplistic at times. I don't know, there would be a paragraph talking about emotional things, and then it would say, and Ella Montgomery made $2,400 on her book that year. I was like, wait a minute, that had nothing to do with the rest of that paragraph. So I didn't care for the writing of this, but it was so interesting to learn about Ella Montgomery's life. And it was surprising to me how difficult it was at times. And yet she wrote with such joy and optimism and hope in all the books of hers that I've read so far. That is like a major theme of them, but her life was filled with struggle and loneliness, and she definitely battled with mental illness, especially chronic depression and possibly some like manic depressiveness episodes. I don't know all the technical names for it, and it didn't really talk about technical names. It just talked about her struggle with depression in particular, and some of the choices that she made along the way that I wanted her to choose differently for herself. But yeah, it was really interesting to learn about her life and really how sad it was. I just wanted to be her friend and give her hugs and help her and support her. It was very sad. I did end up giving this 3 stars, mainly because of the writing style, not because of the life of Ellen Montgomery, which was just so sad. It was very interesting to learn like when the books came out that she was writing in the midst of the things that were going on in her life. That was really, really interesting. Yeah, I'm so glad I read this, but yeah, 3 stars. And finally, I can't tell you what I rated this because this is the final book for my 5-star predictions. I will just tell you that I loved this book. I listened to most of this on audio. I think all of it actually I ended up listening to on audio. As I was doing my walking movement challenge for September. I gave myself the goal of moving 100 miles in September, and I completed that. Yay, go me. So towards the last week and a half or so, on all of my walks, I would listen to The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. And this story is like heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak. And I had to stop a couple times. Some of the walks I did in my other room just using a video, like a YouTube video, for a 3-mile walk, and a couple times I had to sit right down and have a cry. Pause the video, have a cry, because it just was incredibly tragic and difficult. In this book, we follow mainly the life of this young Afghan boy throughout decades of his life. When he's young, he is kind of best friends with one of his household servants' sons. So basically a servant in his household who's super close with his family. His dad is close with this friend's dad. But this boy, Amir, is as a child just very selfish and self-centered and jealous. And then something tragic happens to his friend Hassan. And Amir's jealousy and cowardice prevent him from stepping in and preventing this tragedy from happening. And that choice affects him throughout the rest of his life and keeps coming back around in different ways throughout his life. Yeah, this was so well done and so heartbreaking. It was very interesting to learn about Afghanistan and political things and like history of that country throughout this book as well. And yeah, it made me cry. It made me cry quite a bit. This did come out in 2003, so it's a bit older. And I read it many years ago, and I could remember that main event that happens when they were children, but I didn't remember any of the other kind of surprise things that happened throughout the book, which if I were someone who tried to predict what happened in books, I might have predicted some of those things. They feel a little extreme when you think about it, but it's fiction and kind of that's the point. But I did not predict anything. I just was along for the ride. And so when some of these things happened, I was surprised and shook. Yeah, definitely a fantastic read. I have 2 other books by Khaled Hosseini on my shelves and definitely need to read them. So this was a good one. And that's it. I didn't have any other audiobooks. Well, I was listening to The Kite Runner, so that was my other audiobook for the end of the month. So I just had the 2 audiobooks this month, and these are the 8 that I read at the end of the month. Yay. What a fantastic reading month. So many good books. I would love to hear from you if you have read any of these or any of the 8 that I read earlier in the month. What was one of your favorite books from September? I would love to chat about that or anything else that you want to talk about down in the comments below. Give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be talking to you in another video very soon. Bye.